So anyways, yeah, I just launched my first website. You know, it's just gonna be pretty excited for that actually. So it's, you know, basically a portfolio for car photography because me and my boy Harley, we kind of want to get some fucking money. That's kind of my favorite thing to take photos of, you know, simply because I'm most familiar with it and it's the most comfortable thing for me to do. Yeah, I'm waiting for Harley to come back. He's in China at the moment. Once he comes back, we're gonna pretty much go around to most of the major dealers, and I need to make business cards, right? With my website and everything, my contact details, so I actually look somewhat fucking professional, as well as some nicer looking clothes, because usually I'm just running around sporting a hoodie, which kind of makes me look like a hobo. I mean, no one really cares in Thailand, but it's still good. It shows that you fucking care. So yeah, we got a portfolio, business card, and I just need to wait for Harley to come back. So once he's back, I also have to tell him, you know, I'm sure he has some nice looking clothes. Yeah, so once we get those four things, I guess, you know, portfolio, business card, some nice clothes, and once he's back, we basically, oh, that was 5, that's 4. We just need to go out and actually do the shit. Alright, so you know, you're back from Cars and Coffee or wherever you decided to take your photos from, and now we gotta edit them and give, you know, your own kind of creative style or whatever. I'm just gonna go pretty like quickly through basically what I do. It's really simple and basic edit, you know, because I don't want to really, you know, mess around too much and over edit it, especially when I'm shooting like cars and any kind of commercial style. So yeah, gonna want to start off by cropping. Usually I just use the auto crop, and because for the most part it basically does it just fine. It does it pretty well actually, unless, you know, you just do a colossal fuck up somehow, and AI not AI, sorry, not talking about Lightroom just shits itself. So yeah, for the most part that's okay. And yeah, so next we want to go on to our temperature. I always like shooting with cooler colors. So, you know, I'll always move it up more to the blue side. I just don't like warm colors. And the tint, I usually go for a kind of purplish tint. Not too much though, very, very little. So now we're on to exposure. And with exposure, I always shoot a couple stops underexposed or one stop underexposed. Simply because, you know, before when I started out doing photography and stuff like that, it's much, you know, if the image is overexposed, I can only underexpose the highlights and bring down the highlights so much. Exposure, I usually do one stop. That's pretty good. Contrast, I don't really mess around with contrast when it comes to car photography. I don't like what it does to the image. Because I shoot underexposed, and then I boost it up once whole stop, That means I need to bring down my highlights because I want the car to kind of be balanced out with lighting as far as I'm concerned. That's just my personal preference, and I think it looks the best. So I'm gonna bring down the highlights until, you know, the brightest part of the car kind of doesn't look like a complete different color to the darkest part of the car. So for me, I just find it that bringing down the highlights to kind of equalize it makes it look much better. I always bring up the shadows a little bit so you can get detail back in like the wheels and like the undercarriage, because there's a lot of shadows on cars. I bring down the whites usually a tiny bit because you know, almost every time I go to Cars and Coffee there's no clouds and it's just the sun is a fucking dick. So that's about it for, you know, your exposure, highlights, shadows and stuff like that, white balance stuff. Okay, maybe for presence I'll put clarity up a tiny bit and dehaze just a tiny bit. I'll bring the vibrance down a tiny bit and boost the saturation up a similar amount to what I bring the vibrance down, simply because I want the colors of the car to pop, right? You don't want many different colors, you know, because this car is 3 colors. You got red, green and white. So I'm gonna bring down the vibrance so there's less colors, but I'm gonna boost the colors that are already there so it looks much better. Okay, so now we come down to our tone curves. Yeah, I don't mess around with this. I don't like it. I just prefer using, you know, I don't know what this is called, but the one where you have the options for RGB, red, green and blue. I prefer to do that. I start off by crushing the blacks because I like giving the dark areas a kind of faded look. And I, you know, usually for the most part I do my standard S curve. You bring the shadows down and the highlights up. Something like this looks pretty good. So far we only did a couple of changes, not that much, you know, it's only taken us a couple of minutes. If I wasn't explaining everything, it'd probably take me 1 minute. And here's the before and after. It looks pretty good. So now we're on to our colors. I don't use HSL, I use colors. And so now there's a pretty good tip, you know, I don't shoot with a polarizing filter simply because it messes up the colors, which really sucks because it really does help with reflections. It's probably because I'm not using a really expensive and really good filter, but you know, I'm kind of fucking broke, so I can't do much about that. So you see you have your red parts here, which are the stripes from the livery. And if I boost up the red, you can see that the white parts and the different colored reflections in the red part kind of become harder to see and it kind of blends in more. So that's a pretty good tip. I'm gonna leave the red the way it is. I like it. I don't see any need to brighten it up or darken it because then it looks a bit unnatural. I do like kind of like greenish orange, not orange, greenish yellow trees. I really like those colors, so that's what I do. I usually green all the way to the left, saturation all the way up. Now here's a big part of editing car photography, you know. You got your blues, because cars are basically giant fucking mirrors. You can see that, holy shit, there's a lot of blue. Usually, you know, I don't mind having a like completely white sky. I think it looks kind of cool, but you know, there were no clouds on the day I took these photos, and yeah, you can see that the car is pretty much completely blue. Bringing down the saturation all the way can make it look not blue in the dark areas, but you know, that takes a lot longer time to kind of have it so that there are still blues in the images in the sky and stuff like that. So for the most part, I usually just bring it down to like 40-50%, no more than 60 honestly, if I'm just trying to do a quick edit, which this is. And now our purples, up and down. You can see purples, there's quite a bit being affected there, so I'm gonna boost up the purples and I'm gonna change the hue so it looks kind of bluish. It gives a little bit nice kind of not magenta, more like teal kind of look. I dig it. Magenta helps fills in some of the reflections here on the car door, so I'm going to take that and I'm going to turn it to red so it fills in those reflections. Highlights, when it comes to like quick edits like this and trying to get a car that looks real to life, I don't mess with split toning simply because it changes the color of the image too much. So yeah, for the most part I don't mess with that. I just close that. Sharpening, you can always do a bit of sharpening. I don't do too much. You know, when you're looking at the image at like its full size, you know, doing sharpening doesn't help that much. You don't notice much, but you know, when you come in, you can really see a difference. I'll do it like halfway. It really depends on your image. This stuff as well, noise reduction. I can't even see. Yeah, the noise reduction, because I shot this on ISO 100, which you should, there's barely any noise. So noise reduction is actually just removing some of the dirt and grit on the car. So I'll bump that up all around 80%. So now comes lens correction settings. Usually you just want to do this. You know, Lightroom does a really good job of that. You can see it removes a lot of the chromatic aberration, sorry. And as far as lens profile corrections, always turn that on, so you don't get this really bad vignetting. As you can still see, even with it on, there's a bit of vignetting in the corners there, but you know, it really helps a lot, so you don't get vignetting. And so now usually I do this to almost all photos. Just really quickly get your graduated filter, bring it down from the sky, bring the exposure down a little bit, maybe saturation down as well. And from below, you do the same thing, bring it up, bring the exposure down. A good rule of thumb is to kind of get the shadow to be similar color to what you're underexposing with the graduated filter. I'm actually gonna rotate this a bit so it's following the line here. Fuck's sake. And then you get your radial filter, just draw it over the car. And then I think that's pretty good. And then make sure you invert it. And now this is a pretty good tip to, like, for example, you know, you edit your entire image and stuff like that, and then got to this point, and then, you know, for example, maybe you're not happy with the exposure of the car or the shadows of the car, so you know, you can do this in post after you've done everything. You know, bring up the exposure, and it's only gonna affect the exposure in this area here. So I'll bring it up a little bit. I think the car's a bit dark, and I'm gonna bring up the shadows a little bit. There you go. I'm liking that. Actually, bring exposure down a bit. There we go. Perfect. I'm really happy with that. Shift, make that bigger. You gotta duplicate it as well. Invert it, and then now you have a way to make a vignette around your subject. So you're gonna bring the exposure down, and usually how I do it is I just bring it all the way down and look at what's actually being affected. This looks, I don't want, you know, it's getting a bit of the roof and the bottom of the car, so I'm gonna make that a tiny bit bigger. I'm happy with that. That looks pretty good. So then you just play around with it till you're happy. And I'm pretty happy with that. So you got a before and after. That probably took us, I don't know, 10 minutes with me explaining everything. So imagine if I didn't explain everything and you just knew how to do all of this stuff by yourself. So that's pretty good, huh? So now you got your fucking photos done, you got them edited, and now you just gotta upload it to Instagram, your website, wherever, and then go out and get a fucking gig. So yeah, that's the next step, I guess. So I'm waiting for Hardy to come back. Can't believe we're already gonna do this so soon. And I'll catch you guys later.